Hello, and welcome back to ATA Live, or what I have taken to calling Death and Taxes, the discussions of all things inevitable in life. I'm glad that's still getting a laugh from Eugene 3 weeks in a row.
Yes, I just think it's a little bit negative, but I'm happy to go with it. We haven't talked much about debt so far.
Far be it from me to associate taxes with something negative, Gene. I mean, that doesn't sound like me at all. That's anyway. So this is ATA Live, brought to you by ATA. What does that stand for? I'm glad you asked. It's the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, taxpayers.org.au. They help us to keep the lights on and keep coming back to you each week. So go check out the website, check out the campaigns. Feel free to join if you're feeling generous. So that's ATA. Sponsoring ATA Live. This is being simulcast to Facebook and YouTube and X. So please, wherever you're watching it now, give it a like, give it a share, give it a comment, boost it around the algorithm. That's the way that people can find us, and that is very helpful for us. And also, whichever one you're watching it on, please go and find us on the other ones. So find Australian Taxpayers Alliance, John Humphreys, Gene Tunny on all of the above. And you can also now find us on Substack, which we will be using increasingly from this time on, which I've taken to, I don't know if this is just me or if I'm, a boomer, a bit late to the craze. It seems to me Substack is just like more intelligent, more thoughtful X, with less interaction, but deeper thoughts. So that could be a useful spot for us. So anyway, all that out of the way, this is live. So we do take comments. You will see our mistakes. We'll intentionally make at least 2 mistakes in this next hour just to prove that it's live. And we do take your comments. So if you're watching along on YouTube, Facebook, or X, feel free to put in a comment, put in a question, put in some criticism, put in anything starting with a K sound, and we'll share your questions on the screen, answer them, disagree with you, agree with you. Feel free to distract us if you like. If you have better questions or ideas than we have, we're happy to be distracted. But otherwise, we're going to be talking about productivity. And to do that, we are... Sorry, Gene, I normally stop and pause and ask you how you're doing, but I should do that then. Gene, how are you?
I'm doing fine, John. I mean, really, fascinated by all the economic discussion we've had lately. I mean, even though I think the productivity roundtable from the government may not amount to much, at least it has stimulated conversation and debate on important policy issues. So it's been positive in that regard. And so, so it's actually quite an exciting time to be an economist. So, that's what I'd say.
You say very often.
Yes. So I think I'm pretty positive, pretty happy.
That may well have been the main intention, because it doesn't seem like they're going to do much. But anyway, before we get too far into this, we do have a guest for this session. We did promise that every second or third week we would try to bring on a guest, someone potentially just as witty or wise, or perhaps even more so than ourselves, Gene, because I think we've only claimed to be the best 2 economists in Queensland. So if we can bring in some economists from outside Queensland, then we'll be able to... I don't want to say improve things, but we'll share the joy, share the love. So for this week, we have Chris Berg, Dr. Chris Berg, Professor Chris Berg from RMIT University, who we've known for a while, who's been doing great work, who does it much more thoughtfully and robustly and with far bigger words than I do when he writes. So Chris, how you doing?
I'm really well. It's an honor as speaking as, one of the top 40 economists in Victoria, I think. It's an honor to hang out with you guys tonight.
Well, it's tougher for you. We only have 3 economists in Queensland, so getting in the top 2 is a bit easier.
Well, anyway, honor to be here. Happy to chat productivity.
Very good.
And all right. So before we throw you under the bus, Chris, I believe, Gene, you have something to share with us, because while the government was putting on their productivity summit, in secret to try and see if they could get the unions and business groups to agree with each other. Yeah, good luck. So as they were doing that, there was another productivity summit going on behind a paywall at Sky News, I believe. And now, once again, inexplicably, my invitation was lost in the mail, along with Chris's. So, something's wrong with the mail system in this country. But I believe, Gene, you no longer get to say that, because your invitation wasn't lost in the mail. And you were there to share your wit and wisdom with the crowd. So what did you learn and what did you teach?
Yes, well, you're talking about Matt Canavan's Real Productivity Roundtable, which was held in one of the committee rooms in Parliament House, directly above the cabinet room where the productivity roundtable was occurring. Now, it was paywalled behind on Sky, but it is all on YouTube now, so you can watch the full hour and a half session that I took part in. Ross Greenwood moderated it. It was very good. We had Gary Banks, we had David Pearl, and Aidan Morrison from CIS, who just absolutely knocked it out of the park with his presentation. Now, why Matt wanted to have this roundtable, I mean, there's obviously a political angle from Matt's perspective, but he did notice that the productivity roundtable that the government is running, it didn't have anyone from mining or who could speak about the energy cost issue in Australia that we're facing, the real, the acceleration or the rapid ramp up in energy prices. They didn't really have anyone who was addressing that. So Matt thought, okay, here's my opportunity to have my own roundtable, and I mean, he gets a political win out of it. So what I'd like to show, John, is if I can show the first slide. This is a chart that Matt put together. This is Matt Canavan, Senator from Queensland. It's a chart that he put together regarding what's happened with productivity growth in the different sectors over the past 20 years. And Matt thought it was very strange that of the sectors where you've actually had declining productivity, they weren't represented at that roundtable in his view. And the large ones there are mining. I mean, there could be all sorts of various reasons, compositional reasons, also issues to do with industrial relations or regulations, environmental approvals. But we see electricity, gas, waste, and water, and I think it's mainly going to be electricity. You see this big decline in productivity as we move towards energy sources that are, intermittent. We have more renewables in the system. So that was a big feature of this conference. It was looking at what's happening with energy costs, the contribution of the intermittency of renewables to the higher costs, the fact that we need to rely more on gas as to actually balance the demand and supply. And then if gas is in short supply, then the price really is bid up in the NEM. And so that's raising the electricity costs. And so it's related to how we're having this rapid rollout of renewables. And this is one of the points that Aidan Morrison made very well in his talk. And so what it's meant is that over the last decade and a half, we've had electricity prices, that's the blue line there, increase much faster than general prices. And we've effectively had this, I think it's about 60 to 70% increase in the real cost of electricity, of retail electricity prices in Australia. So yes, and that's obviously of great concern to households. And we also see the issues that businesses and heavy industrial users are facing with high energy costs, what that means for their viability. We've got companies like BHP announcing job losses or job cuts. There are all sorts of concerns about the viability of smelting and refining operations, risks to cities like Mount Isa and Gladstone. So these were the issues that were being kicked around. Also, we had Gary Banks and David Pearl drawing attention to the large growth of government spending, what that means for productivity, issues we've talked about a lot on this show, John, the growth of the NDIS. And David made an interesting speech. This is David Pearl, former Treasury Assistant Secretary, who I worked with many years ago. He made an interesting point about how he thinks the institutional capability of our bureaucracies is not as strong as it once was. He's concerned about the quality of some of the leadership there. So yes, all up, a really interesting session. Matt concluded that the main takeaways were, well, we really do need to get government spending under control to improve productivity. To a significant extent, the productivity problem is related to the growth of government, the allocation, the diversion of resources to less productive uses, sectors that don't grow as fast in terms of productivity. And then the whole issue of the higher energy costs and what that means for costs of production, what it means for our competitiveness. That was a concern of, well, Aidan's and Gary's, and also Henry Ergas joined us online too for some wise words. So that's basically the where it ended up. I thought it was a great discussion. Well done to Matt for organising it and for highlighting these important issues.
Great. Do you know if they're going to release anything from that? I mean, there's the video. I guess that's the output.
I mean, Matt released a communique which was, summarised his 4 takeaways from the roundtable, and the 2 I remember are the ones about, well, we obviously need to have a much more balanced energy policy, so we're not so heavily relying on renewables and a rapid increase in them, which is increasing the costs of energy generation. And then he wants to cut, he's arguing we need to significantly cut government spending or restrain the growth of that. David Pearl made a really strong point that if we're going to get back to where we were, I forget that it might have been before the turn of the century, or it might have been last century. I'm trying to remember exactly what his benchmark point is, but he's arguing we need to cut it by 4 percentage points of GDP to get back to something reasonably sensible. And I mean, I think he's probably right about the magnitude of it. I think that's the type of significant cutting government spending that would be desirable, in my view, if we are going to do something real about improving productivity and reducing the tax burden.
Yeah, 4% could be a good start. Just on this graph that you've got, 4 percentage points. This graph you've got in front of us. Now, I understand, was this put together by you or Matt?
Oh, that was put together by me. I just pulled it off Macrobond earlier, so it could be a little bit the labels that Macrobond puts on. That's the data service. Sometimes they can be a bit hard to understand.
Because it says housing, utilities, electricity. Is that
it's electricity? It's definitely electricity. It's part of a larger category of housing and utilities in the CPI. It's just the way it's just the label of the category. Yeah.
Because I'm not here to carry water for the coalition. Often very disappointed in the coalition, but it's quite remarkable that graph where it takes off, where the 2 lines diverge. I can't help but notice that is very soon after 2007.
Yes.
And then flattens again around 2013. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to compliment the coalition here or trying to just pick on Labour.
Doesn't go
that
down
does seem
after 2013, to be clear.
No, it just seems to stop going up. I mean, do we know? I mean, there's the obvious answer here, which is just the change in government and change in policy in 2007. But do we know specifically what triggered this? Was there other events that could explain this?
Oh, well,
or is it just as simple as Labor got elected?
I wouldn't say it's as simple as Labor got elected, because it's because it's basically all the renewables that started coming into the system, and that was starting to happen under the coalition too. So, I mean, the Labor did introduce a emissions trading scheme eventually, but and a carbon tax that lasted a few years, from 2010 to 2013. But like the takeoff occurred before that, and from what I can tell,
that's shown out on this graph. I mean, on this graph, it looks like we need something to explain a step change, like a qualitative shift that happened around 2008 from eyeballing it.
Yes, but I think pinning it solely on a change.
I'm not trying to. I'm saying. Yeah, I'm suggesting there must be something else, because that just seems too easy, right? I mean, that's commentating on economics with a political bent. If we just see a graph like this, and that conclusion is just too easy, so I'm wondering, what am I missing here? What else happened at that time? Does your memory go back that far, Chris?
It does. I mean, the issue is potentially partly that there was a radical increase in the use of renewables in the economy, and if you'll recall, at the very end of the Howard era, there was a strong play from the Howard government to do so as well. That was continued under the Abbott and then Turnbull and Morrison governments. So that's quite plausible, but I would want to see some fine-grained data, more fine-grained data here.
Well, whatever the cause, this does sort of stand out as indicating
it does
prices.
wink in a general direction. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, and regardless of the cause, it does suggest, I mean, that this timing also overlaps a period of productivity slowdown in the country. So it does also hint at the idea of electricity prices may be part of that story.
So a big problem with the productivity is challenge is that it's only now become quite evident because it was or only in the last decade has it become quite evident that we've got this productivity challenge, because the productivity statistics had actually been hiding the productivity crash during the mining boom. So the mining boom held up the top level statistics in a way that sort of obscured the underlying problem. And ultimately that ends up being part of the political framing of this challenge. But in fact, our productivity problem has been growing in emphasis and severity since the late 1990s or early 2000s, at least. It's only now that we're seeing it because we don't have the mining boom to hold it back and to hold back the consequences.
When did the mining boom peter out in that case?
So early 2000s, so around 2005, 2007, in that period. I'm unfortunately as not prepared as Gene is, so I don't have any charts on me right now. But I think the macro point that I want to make is that the productivity crisis is not a productivity crisis of this term of government or even the last decade. It's a productivity crisis that has been building since the early 2000s and then has now become extremely severe, or put it another way, has become so severe that even the government is starting to really worry about it. And you can see how this has played out over the last 12 months. So we weren't talking about productivity before the election at all, because the government didn't have a productivity plan. It didn't have an economic growth plan. As soon as the election was done, Treasury clearly told the Treasurer that this is the most important problem facing Australia right now. You're not facing an election. You need to put everything down and focus on this, which is why we're starting to get some movement in some actually relatively important areas. Not at all what I would prefer and the strength of what I would prefer, and not at all certainly what the Senator Canavan's attendees and audience would. But we are starting to talk about, wow, red tape is a problem. The last time we spoke about red tape in Australia from a political perspective was about was under, I think, the Turnbull government had the last red tape policy. Now suddenly we're talking about cutting red tape again, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Chris? I mean, how they got to this position, how the government got to this position, it's through that Ezra Klein book on abundance. So they see it as a way to progress their policy agenda, and they're concerned particularly about renewables and the rollout of green energy. So that's where it's interesting. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, however they get to it, I mean, I'd prefer them to think more broadly. I mean, it's not just about regulations affecting green energy; it's regulations affecting mining and other sectors too. But look, however they get to that position, good on them. It's just interesting how much impact that book has had.
Exactly, and it's an interesting case study on how public policy changes, right? So the free market economists like myself, like everybody here, we have been talking about the burden that red tape has imposed on the economy for a very long time. In the United States, however, there's a lot of thinkers, particularly Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, who wrote that book Abundance, who were starting to realize that the burden of regulation on government programs was so high that the benefits from spending money on infrastructure couldn't be realized in the presidential term in which it was spent. So this is an argument that many on the left have made, which is that Joe Biden spent all this money on infrastructure, and that infrastructure has been held up by government regulation. So to the extent that that infrastructure will be built, it will be realized in Donald Trump's term when he gets to take the credit for it. Now, we can have our perspectives on whether infrastructure is these are great spending plans, but that's how they started to rethink it. And then but it's not just government infrastructure spend, is it not? And it's not just renewable energy spending and so forth. It's also housing. And again, in the last 5 years, there is a global recognition in Australia, in the United States, in the rest of the Western democracies, that there just is a housing crisis, that the heritage and planning controls of the 1970s have just gotten out of control, and that they're materially holding back people's lives. There are really material consequences for that. So what the abundance people have done is that they've tied an argument against government regulation of the private sector, housing, to government regulation of the public sector, renewables and infrastructure and so forth. And we can be skeptical that it doesn't go far enough, but my God, that's an incredible change on the center left. And the fact that the Australian government has been so quick to pick that up as a message, I think we should take a lot of comfort from and a lot of credit for, because we have been spelling out these arguments against red tape and against overregulation for a very long time. Sometimes it takes Nixon to go to China. Sometimes it takes the Labor Party to deregulate the economy.
Now, I don't know if I'm just being overly pessimistic here, if this is a bit of a black pill, but I can't help but see a scenario where industries are deregulated incrementally in a way that ends up basically picking winners. So you now have a light regulation touch on all of the industries that are being picked as winners, and a low regulatory touch on, you understand what I'm saying, right? So this is
I'm sure that
another industry policy. So you'd agree that, this is an analogy here for the argument in the trade world, where they say, tariffs are bad, cutting tariffs are good. But if you're just cutting tariffs on one particular country, there's potential that's going to actually create a net negative, because of this distortion effect could outweigh the cutting the tariff effect. And it's potentially the same thing here. If we only cut regulation on one particular type of energy, which may be that they're picking the exact right energies. It could be they are that smart. But if they make a mistake, then all we're doing is speeding up the descent towards a bad industry policy.
Well, but that's going to be true almost anything, any way that you deregulate the economy. You are going to be choosing sectors that you think are the most prospective for growth, or just pure political goals or ideological goals, or that sort of thing. The challenge for the center right and for free market thinkers and free market parties is, how can we use what we believe will be a successful deregulation program? If they do it, we think that it will have deregulatory benefits. How can we use those benefits to demonstrate that you can get all those benefits across the economy? If we want to rebuild a manufacturing sector, well, wouldn't it be good if we didn't just removed planning restrictions on houses, but we also removed planning restrictions on factories and commercial businesses and all those sorts of things? So I think I like to see deregulation wherever and whenever it can be, in the same way that I think we would all say the tax cuts generally are good, and I'll take them when I see them. I will take deregulation when I see it, but I want to use that success to demonstrate the need for more general ones. And I hope that the next coalition government can grab this zeitgeist and do the same for other industries.
Well, it's interesting, the potential political cover it might give future governments to be able to say, we're just repeating what the last government did. That could be the politics.
That's how the reform movement in the 1980s and 1990s happened here in New Zealand.
You don't look that old, Chris. You don't look that
old. In the United States, that's how it played out as well. A genuine deregulation movement has to come from both sides of politics if it's going to be sustainable. We don't want this back and forth, regulate, over-regulate. We can't. That's not going to get the certainty and stability that we want, and it's not going to get the growth that we want. So I think what's come out of, I've got criticisms of what's coming out of the productivity summit. I think it can go further. I have some concerns with some of the policies that are being proposed. But generally speaking, this seems to be a productivity summit that is focused on deregulation, and the government actually has done pretty well batting away some of the union special interests calls. So I am as surprised as anybody else to see this level of free market enthusiasm out of this government, but I'm happy to take it when I see it.
Free market enthusiasm. Can I just say the other part of the regulation puzzle you suggested we might get movement on here is first they'll deregulate green energy, all right? But you said something about housing as well. Now, this seems to me like an issue where I think both sides of politics at their senior levels have kind of known the direction for quite a while now. And the issue is just that no one knows how to get it done. Now, a productivity summit seems like where the people that already agreed 10 years ago come together and say that they agree even harder, but still don't know how to get it done, as far as I can tell. So it's
a deeper and more challenging problem on housing, because it's not, for the most part, it's not the federal government that's the problem. It's not even really the state governments, although the state governments have tools at their disposal. The challenge is the local governments that just slow down the process of building. And now, how do you communicate to local government? How do you force local government to move towards a deregulatory position? That's a lot harder. Probably the state governments have more, definitely the state governments have more tools to do so, but the state governments weren't in the room. And it is the state politicians that unfortunately are the most NIMBY, the most not in my backyard.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris, about how the state pollies weren't in the room. And Daniel Mookie was representing all the state treasurers apparently, but you wonder how effective that would be. It would have been good to have more state reps there, given that some of the big policy issues the states are heavily involved in. And also the debates about taxation and fiscal federalism that John and I always talk about on this show. You need the states really to be part of that conversation.
I think the New South Wales, I don't follow all the state governments too closely. There's too many of them, only so many hours in the day, and it would be a very weird hobby. But from what I can tell in New South Wales, there does seem to be some openness on behalf of the Minns government to ideas of trying to somewhat deregulate the housing industry, and they keep running into local councils as the brick wall, which of course they fundamentally ultimately control. Local councils exist. They're basically just another bureaucratic arm of the state government that have been given the appearance of autonomy, and everyone's scared of telling them what to do because that appearance has been ingrained in our minds. But Chris, then can I get you over the line on my I don't know if I'll call it a movement, my campaign, me old man shouting at a cloud, abolish local councils, replace them with private body corporates instead.
I've always thought that the solution to our problems would be, I'm a fan of the top and tail strategy to Australian political reform. I want to get rid of local councils and the federal government, and I want to move us just back to a states thing. So Ryan Burns in the chat has got a great question, which is clearly directed at me, that I'd love to address. Thanks, Ryan. So I'll give some background, and then I'll try to give you an update about where we are on that. There's a program that, in fact, I've been quite involved with over many years called RegData, which is a new way to try to measure regulation. If you can measure it, you can cut it. If you can't measure it, you don't know whether you've cut it effectively. And frankly, you don't know what the most consequential regulations are available to cut. You don't know which is the worst one. So RegData was a new way of measuring regulation by looking at the what they called restrictiveness clauses. So anytime a piece of legislation said the word must, so you must do this, or you shall do this, so individuals or businesses, so forth, that was a restrictive clause. It restricted the economy in some way, or forced us to do something, or stopped us from doing something else. So RegData was a project run out of the Mercatus Center in the United States that I helped bring down to Australia with the IPA, with the Institute of Public Affairs as well, to measure the Australian how much regulation there was in Australia. So we've done that. We've got it up and running for the Australian context. This program was actually trialled very briefly, but it was trialled by the Newman government. So for my two Queensland friends, they set up a RegData Queensland. It only lasted, I think, 18 months, which is a shame. But so very cool. But you're absolutely right, Ryan, to notice that, hey, we've got some cool new technologies now. Have you noticed this? There was an AI element to reg data, but it wasn't an LLM. It wasn't these modern AI platforms that are so cool. And so what I'm really interested in, and in fact we've been working on, is using the reg data platform and potential future reg data systems to have more of a semantic understanding about what regulation is and does. So actually understanding not just there's the word must and there's the word shall, so that's restrictive, but actually trying to understand what the interdependencies are between all these rules. Understand, well, this legislation interacts with this legislation, so this means that if you do this sort of activity, it would be more regulated or less regulated, and so forth. So there's some really cool work coming out of the US that, in fact, I literally had a phone call earlier this week with the teams working on that, and we're hoping to bring it out for Australia. In fact, not only we're not the only ones interested in this, the Productivity Commission has been interested in this as well, but it is very live, and as you rightly identify, the tools that we have now are just incredible. And so we can know more about how overregulated we are, and if we know more about it, then we can start to chip away at it.
Right. Well, I think that also potentially gives us a good opportunity to segue. As far as I can tell, you said that the summit in Canberra from the government seems to be heavily focused on regulatory issues. I don't know if I've read this somewhere, but my impression was those regulatory issues, tax issues, and AI or technology issues. So I've just bundled my thoughts into those three categories such that I have them. And you mentioned AI, which seems like an opportunity to segue.
That does sound like a great segue. Thank you.
Before I do that segue, can I just...
I'm just going to talk.
Before I do that, though, I just want to ask the people watching along at home, while you're watching this, please give it a like, please give it a share. It helps to kick the algorithm around as we're speaking now. So I can see you at home. This is a two-way camera. I know you think you're watching us. We can see you as well. That's how far technology's got. I'll be able to tell if you're pressing the like button.
And get back to it.
All right. So AI, Chris, have you heard of this? Do you know how to spell it, or do you know anything else about this complicated?
Yeah. Look, so let me give you. So what is the government thinking? So AI is an incredible tool for productivity. The estimates that we have from white collar workers using just ChatGPT, so basic out of the box AI platforms, is that a white collar worker can get, I've seen estimates from about 17% to all the way to 45% increases in productivity. Just picking up the box, opening it up, doing that work. That is outstanding. That's an enormous productivity boon. So imagine that you're the Australian government and you know that you have a catastrophic problem with productivity, and suddenly Silicon Valley is invented the world's history's greatest productivity tool, certainly greatest productivity tool for people who sit in front of the computer all day. That's a massive win, and you're hoping that AI will be able to solve your productivity problems just holus bolus. So a lot of lobby groups, a lot of the union movement have been really trying to push the Albanese government to come out with some substantial AI regulation. They're worried about job loss. They're worried about, there's quite a lot of concern about copyrighted data in AI training. There's a lot of concern from a lot of different sectors, but the Albanese government, rightly to my mind, has been very resistant to that because they see it as my God, imagine if suddenly the productivity problem just solved itself. As an aside, I think we as free market economists should be really clear here. The government is not going to increase productivity. That's not what the government does. Productivity increases come from innovation and technological change in the private sector. Now, innovation and technological change can be used by the public sector as too, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to get productivity from independent people coming up with innovations, doing exciting things themselves. Governments can regulate all that away and we'll lose those productivity gains. Governments can try to clear away regulation so that it is easier for us to do innovation, but it's always going to come from us. And it's always going to come from our adoption of new ideas, whether that's new business models, new technologies, and so forth. So along comes AI. Fantastic. The priority for the government at this stage, or at least thus far, post-election, has been let's not regulate it. Let's let the private sector pick it up. I'll make another point that wasn't always the case for this government. There was AI regulation that I understand was brought to cabinet earlier this year before the election that was that cabinet did not let go through, in part not because of the productivity burden, but because they were worried about what the Trump administration would say. So there has been proposals to regulate AI. There isn't right now. So you're right, John, that we've got a deregulatory drive, we've got a tax drive, and then we've got, my God, this AI thing might save us all. I am incredibly bullish on the capacity for artificial intelligence to get productivity gains. I think it is transformative. I think I think it genuinely is the next industrial revolution. And I'm pleased to see the government not try to go the European path, which is try to regulate it out of its jurisdiction.
Yeah, Chris, what do you think?
How they would regulate it? I'm not even sure how they would regulate it out of existence.
Well, let me tell you how you do it. So there's a lot of AI platforms that are either adopted later or not adopted at all in Europe because of the AI restrictions that they have placed on. And that's only going to get worse because the way that the European AI regulations have been written is to limit the size of models. We are coming up to those, to that model size now. And so it's going to be harder and harder for AI firms to release their products in the European Union. Do
you have any examples, Chris? What are some examples of AI products that have been delayed or aren't being adopted in Europe?
So whenever there's a new ChatGPT model, it'll come slower in Europe.
Right.
A lot of the generative AI image services aren't available in Europe. Those sorts of things.
Right. Where do you think
Yep. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask, where do you think the really big productivity gains are going to come from? Because I think, I don't know. I mean, it seems, are we getting diminishing returns with the LLMs? And then maybe if we get to AGI, but is that the artificial general intelligence, but is that even plausible? And then I suppose we then combine it with robotics. But yeah, I just don't have a feel for how many years or decades away that is. I mean, potentially it is a big deal. I just don't know what time frame we're talking about. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Interesting question. I mean, we're only 2 and a bit years into this revolution, and it is fun to say that we're getting diminishing marginal gains. Or diminishing gains. There's a very sustained exponential increase in AI capabilities on every measure that we have to measure them. The media loves to spend time saying that the latest AI model was a disappointment and maybe it's slowing down, which again, 2 and a bit years into this journey is just the weirdest thing that you can possibly imagine. Unless every new product is the greatest revolution that has happened, everybody's very negative about it. So the gains come from 2 paths. The first one is, well, the nature of this technology, or the chatbot technology specifically, is that they are adopted bottom up. So the way I use AI to be more productive will not be the way you use it. Maybe you find it good to write emails. Maybe I find it stupid. Maybe you find it good to write articles. Maybe I don't, or vice versa, or whatever it is. And it turns out that it's a technology that is very particular to the way you do work. And it's a partner. It's like being given a research assistant or a PA. It's always going to be very particular to how you work. So it ends up being a bottom-up technology, which makes that is very hard for companies to come in and say, hey, we're all going to use these LLMs, chatbots, and you're all going to use it to write your emails and so forth. Although companies have tried to do that. So we're going to see bottom-up productivity gains from white-collar workers. Now, it is, however, of course, a general technology, and it's going to and is making a whole suite of parts of business function much more automatable. from consumer help desks are just much better now. Call centers, all the way to the sort of robotics that you're talking about as well. We've got to bear in mind that some of these, we call them LLMs, but it's actually a suite of different sorts of models that can understand images, can produce images. These are different things. Can write text, can listen, can talk. And that's a multimodal capabilities that, when combined, allow you to do really interesting things. So think about robotics. One of the big challenges that we have in robotics is, how do robots know the world and environment in which they're operating? Well, it turns out that these new generation of AI can build world models. They can make predictions about the shape of an object, not just see the object there, because they've got a model of the world in their head. They've got an idea. So robotics is advancing really rapidly, which is why we can start to get some of these humanoid robots that, you know, Tesla and various Chinese companies and Boston Robotics and so forth are releasing. So you and I, we're all experiencing the chatbot, and
Yes.
it is materially changing our lives. But it's that class of innovations being adopted both from the bottom up and in industrial purposes that is the real productivity gain.
Can I
go, John.
roles? Two ways I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and the two different ways I'm playing it contradict each other. So don't expect any consistency on my part.
Standard John Humphreys.
But the first one is, this looks like it might be the long-awaited promise of the so-called fourth industrial revolution, which I hate those terms, but it's the terms there already. But this fourth industrial revolution was supposed to kick in, was it 30 odd years ago when we started getting the internet, and it did look on its face like it was world-changing, and it has significantly changed the way you and I live our lives. It has been world-changing in one sense. But at the same time, if you track those 30 years, it's not obvious that the productivity boom has been what we were promised from 30 years ago. So I wonder, we've now got a new technology 2 years in, and it looks world-changing, especially looks world-changing in the way we live our lives now. We might write more emails instead of letters. We might sit behind more desks instead of, visiting people. So it may change the way we live our lives. But 30, 35 years ago, we were promised this was going to revolutionize our lives and productivity. And I feel like it revolutionized our lives and ...
Yeah.
And so a skeptic might look at that and go, all right, so now we've just got the same story that I heard 30 years ago being recycled. Why believe this one?
Yeah, I mean, look, so we do see the computers in the productivity statistics. That was a fair criticism in the 1980s and 1990s. We do see them. Unfortunately, they have not been enough to keep up with the productivity downturn across the rest of the economy. That's a shame.
The computers themselves, I think, was the third industrial revolution. It was supposed to be the Internet of Things was the fourth industrial revolution. And
look. So I find those third, fourth, whatever, that they're a big question. Well, I'm more interested in what is the material impact of the technology itself, and I do think that this is a qualitatively different technology that has very material impacts on the sorts of work that we do. So it's very easy to identify roles, business functions that can be replaced or augmented because of this technology, ones that add material benefit to our lives and to the organizations that form them, and just the fact that we can do our work much more efficiently now. I think the challenge comes when we start taking ourselves out of the way patterns of activity occur in the economy already, and start thinking, well, what are the new patterns that will form as a result of this technology? Some of the economists that have been most skeptical of the AI revolution, Darren Acemoglu is one of them, the Nobel Prize winner, has forecast very low productivity gains as a result of this AI. And typically what they do is those sorts of estimates look at the range of tasks that exist in the economy, and they say, well, only 10% of them could be augmented by by these new technologies. So therefore, we'll only see a maximum 10% or whatever it is increase. What we're going to see is changing tasks and new patterns of behavior because of this, because of the robotics, because of the LLMs, because of the imagery. And then I'll make another point. So I'm very, very bullish on the pure productivity. I'm very convinced this will show up in the productivity stats and it'll show up in a very significant way. But it will also show up in those non-productivity ways that just make our lives better. There's going to be more visual stimuli. There's going to be more engagement with digital objects. There's going to be more entertainment. There's going to be more of the things that we tend to say that we like and enjoy. It's not going to come without difficulties, but there's going to be more of it, and it's going to be very exciting as well. So
Yeah.
I think material productivity benefits and sort of hedonic goods as well.
Well, I think the hedonic impact is good. I apologize, Jig. I just wanted to get the 1, 2 in for the 2 parts there. I was going to say that I don't think there's any denying the hedonic benefits of the fourth industrial revolution when it showed up the first time with the internet. I think some people are skeptical that living a better online world necessarily gives people a better social life, but that's a whole other sociological question of whether the better the screen, the less real your real world friends are, and whether there's any link between that and loneliness and depression and the rest of it. But that probably goes beyond the scope of what we are normally asked for our opinion on.
I can go into that too if you like, but yes.
I'll just put a bow on the first 2. We can come back to that if you like. I'd be very interested to hear the thoughts on that. Or maybe I should just stop. Well, let me give the second potential devil's advocate role, which is in the exact opposite direction. The first one kind of poo-pooing the degree to which this will change the world. The second devil's advocate one being, if this does take off significantly, and I know this has been said in every other industrial revolution that's come before, but if this does take off significantly, what do people with below 90 IQ do in the world?
I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the people above 90 IQ. That's what I fear for. I don't fear for jobs. So I don't fear that there is going to be work for humans to do, because there has always been work because we demand more. But this is an unusual technology. This is a technology that displaces the sorts of tasks that smart people did, and smart people do. It displaces art and writing and analysis.
Can I just get specific on this? Because I think the obvious economist's answer is, yes, this makes it much easier to do what smart people do. But the logical economist's answer would be, well, therefore smart people can just do much more of that stuff, right? And then the price of all those things goes down and you just get a hell of a lot of productivity. I get all of that. And even if you don't have a job in that world, you can then use this technology to be able to simulate a lot of the benefits yourself. So it seems to me we've got an issue here with people who lack access or ability to effectively use this technology run the serious risk of getting left behind, which is why I was specifically pointing to the people of lower IQ. And I guess we could say we could just solve IQ somehow, but assuming we haven't solved IQ yet, what do we do about the people that are going to struggle to use this technology effectively in a world where everyone needs to be able to get by?
Well, funnily enough, this is very easy technology to use. I mean, that is one of the amazing things about the technology. You can use it out of the box without any training because it's a chatbot. Can you chat?
I'm going to accuse you of lacking awareness of what it is like to live as a 90 IQ. Take it from me. Take it from one of those drooling idiots.
Look, there is absolutely going to be disruptions. I'm not at all concerned about the long-term impact on human labor. Human labor will continue. If not, we will trade it for leisure. If we see that sort of exponential economic growth, then that sounds like a good problem to have, and gives us a lot more policy options as well. So if we did, and I'm not a fan of UBIs or anything like that, universal basic income, but if we get the exponential growth that would create this problem in the first place, that gives us a lot more options to deal with the people who are being fallen behind as well. But again, I mean, I think we should step back, and it is easy to. In fact, I do media interviews all the time. I have conversations like this all the time where everybody wants to problematize it. There's something that's changing radically and everybody wants to be concerned about it. We now have already, before we get to AGI, as Gina's raised, before we get anything more than we have right now, we have effectively infinity intelligence at our fingertips. Now,
And that's
if you
just in this room.
believe, if you believe, as I do, that the problem of economic growth is that we don't have enough ideas, innovation, it causes productivity. We need more ideas. We need more innovation to get rich. Then we now have a stock of near infinite intelligence, subject to, I'll point out, subject to infrastructure build out and energy costs, but and manufacturing and so forth. But we've now changed that. So I say this quite a lot, but I feel I have a deep sense of guilt when I sit in front of my computer every morning, because or not even before I even get there, because I know that I've got what is effectively for me infinite intelligence at my fingertips. Just it's available for me at any time. I can queue up whatever I want. It can do a huge range of things, and I'm guilty. I feel guilty because how can I not think of more things to do with this? How am I not using it more? It's infinite intelligence. It's everything that you could have possibly dreamed of. It's infinite ideas. Why aren't we using it more? Now, that's the barrier. Maybe the barrier is human creativity about how to use infinite intelligence.
Yeah. But Chris, this has got to, sorry, this point has to be controversial, doesn't it? The point you're making about infinite intelligence. How can you say that it's infinite intelligence? It's drawing on the existing body of knowledge, but surely intelligence is about solving new problems and things that haven't been encountered yet. So how can you say that it's infinite intelligence? Is this a widely accepted proposition?
So it's functionally intelligent. So it operates in an intelligent way. That's drawing on the stock of things that have existed before. Well, welcome to brains. So yes, we can be philosophical about it, and yes, I'm sympathetic to arguments that it can't be genuinely creative in a special way that humans can be, but I don't think that's especially meaningful. I don't think that is a material barrier to us getting the benefits of what is effectively infinite intelligence. We can bat around the definition of intelligence as much as you want, but I just don't think it's a meaningful barrier to getting the benefits from it. There's an interesting point here, actually. And let me try out an argument, if you don't mind. It's some of the work I've been doing recently. So we free marketeers don't often realize that it was free market economists that provided the intellectual foundation for much of modern AI. So Friedrich Hayek wrote a book in 1952 called The Sensory Order. If you've read a lot of Hayek, it's probably the book that you haven't read. It's a very difficult book, but it's a book about psychology, not about economics. But in that book, he spells out a way that brains form preferences through training and learning from outside stimuli, from experiences that brain, that person has had, that formed much of the intellectual basis of the neural networks that our AIs are built around. So in that sense, the way the brain is formed from a Hayek's perspective and the way these large language models are formed are the same thing. Now, which one is intelligence and which one is not? We're all being fed stimuli. Now, we're feeding the AIs much less stimuli than you and I are experiencing from birth. But on the other hand, a very particular type of stimuli, which is, the knowledge that has been written down or viewed or created by humans as well. So again, I think we are only just touching the surface about what we can do with the models we already have, given their capabilities. And there's a huge opportunity to get productivity gains just from where we are. Yeah.
Well, I must say, I've been blown away just by interacting with either ChatGPT or Claude. Claude's very good, I think, on economic analysis. I think it's better than ChatGPT, and you can get insights from it, or it can help you think about problems. It won't necessarily solve it for you, but I just find it incredibly valuable. So, you could be onto something there. extraordinary to think about.
Well, I hope, and so does the government, right? So Jim Chalmers would like nothing more than this productivity technology to fix the problems.
My latest boomer shouting at a cloud, actually, I don't think is relevant at all, because I take Chris's point. We're 2 years into this. This is going to change massively. We're on a steep learning curve, and anything happening today will be redundant in 2 years. Although I got to tell you, every time I argue with Grok, and yes, I spend a lot of time arguing with my AIs. It's a good sparring buddy. They're pretty smart. They're pretty quick. But if I argue about something that I really know well, it's nearly always wrong. And after a while, it admits it. And it's good that it can admit it. That's good. But then I go to it and I ask it questions about which I don't know the answer. And it gives me a very confident sounding answer. And just like when people read, there's a name for this when you read it in the newspaper as well. When you get the answer from an issue you don't know the answer, you assume AI is telling you something that it got from a reputable source and intelligently. And I this isn't an AI problem. This is probably just a human gullibility and need to QA our information problem.
It's also true for humans, John. I hate to break it to
you. There is a name for this in the newspaper world already. This has been around forever. If you read a newspaper article about you or something you know about, it's nearly always wrong. And then you turn the page and you read an article about something you don't know about, and you think, oh, well, they've given me the honest situation. Well, obviously they haven't, because they get all the stories wrong. But anyway, that's going to be fixed in the years to come. Can I just? I'm acutely aware that we've got 5 minutes. You said you had to escape us at 8 o'clock. I did want to ask you about the potential tax changes, because Alex Robson, the Productivity Commission, have put up an idea there. Other people have put up. We've suggested the idea of getting rid of the 10% Medicare levy that most people don't know exists. That applies to people earning between $27,000 and $33,000 a year, which is an absurd, irrational, accidental and regressive tax. So, there's my plug there, and all the rest of it. But I'm also fascinated by your potential answer to the issue of social media technology giving us a greater social life online, giving people less of a social life in the real world, and whether that can be linked to the loneliness, depression, et cetera, et cetera. You said you had an answer for that. So I'd be...
Do I have an answer?
Actually,
no,
that's what I'll go with.
I've got
Okay,
observations. Yes. We'll put it this way. Look, this is going to be a very difficult thing. So where I am, as I say, incredibly bullish on AI, the rise of new parasocial relationships with AI is going to be, it's going to be complicated, and there's going to be a really substantial learning period socially for us all. I mean, think where we are right now. We are basically at the cusp of every science fiction story that you've ever read, where we've all got our own robots, and those robots are increasingly personally relating to us. These machines are happening where, in fact, I was on the ABC talking this afternoon about about AI toys, so people that put AI LLMs into soft toys, plushies, and how children are going to relate to them, and so forth. And this is basically C3PO, right? That's what we're talking about. So we're at that stage. Now, how are we going to learn to adjust to that? So at the first instance, we have always had some pretty serious maladjustment problems with every new technology that we've had. So video games. It's been pointed out to me recently that for many people in society, the existence of marijuana being legal is a serious problem that affects their productivity and so forth. I'm pro drug legalization, but that's definitely true. It's definitely true for video games. It's definitely true for television. It's definitely true for almost any other technological change that we experience that allows you to have a parasocial relationship with them, have an at a distance relationship that you feel is very real, but in practice is not. That is going to be a huge challenge for us, and there's going to be a lot of really tough learning that we're going to have to do for the next little while. But on the other hand, there are massive benefits. First of all, we all get cool new robot friends. That's cool. But there's entertainment value that we're going to get from them. There is genuine social learning, even for children, that you can get, particularly for children on the autism spectrum who may be struggling to interact. There's therapeutic benefits. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that some people prefer talking to the AI than talking to a human therapist, and there are good reasons for that. So we're going to get all these really interesting benefits, but we're going to go through, and we've already started over the last couple of months. I think it started. We're going to go through a really big moral panic on this. There's going to be a lot of stories about people who get parasocial relationships with their AI, and it's going to, and for whatever reason, they're going to act badly, and they may cause harm to themselves, and that's going to be absolutely shocking. But it's something that has happened with every technology thus far. The big difference will be between previous technologies that this is happening in public and in a way that the AI labs are very responsive to as well. So this is something that we are going to experience. But again, this is how every sci-fi story you've ever read, how they got their first robots too. We had to figure out what it means to have a semi-human robot in the world. It's wild that we all get to live through this, and it's going to be interesting to see the new difficulties that come up each month.
Yeah. So how far away do you think?
Popular sci-fi. I do believe one of the very popular sci-fi stories also involved them discovering the negative social effects of the robots, killing them all, making them illegal, and then the smuggling on board a spaceship.
Yeah. Pros and cons.
Look, I take your point. There are benefits. I don't think there's any stopping this. I think it's pointless trying to stop it. I think attempting to stop it would just mean we're behind the curve, try to catch up later, get all the negatives anyway, and slow down getting the benefits. So I'm not arguing for stopping this. I got to say, not all technologies in the past have taken people out of social connection. I mean, the first and second industrial revolutions probably created more social connection. I don't know if there is a solution. I'm not suggesting a solution, but I do worry about the degree to which people live life now.
If I go back to my Marxist literature, that's what the first industrial revolution did. It took people out of their communities and their villages and put them into anonymous industrial cities.
Well, except they put them into new social situations, and people have friends in a workplace. But now, if everyone also works from home, socializes from home,
you'll have to go back to your Marxist literature, John. So
I know what he said. I think he was wrong. There was still social circles after the first and second and third industrial revolution.
Yeah,
and maybe I'm jumping in shadows.
And there are still social circles here, but they're different. So again, this is. I think we need to. I think we need to be more critical about this change, because interacting with an AI, and I'm not going to say it's the same as interacting with a person, but it is also simultaneously not the same as staring at television all day. It is more interactive in the same way that my generation would say to our parents that playing a video game is more active than watching television. Because it actually engaged more of the brain and more activity and so forth. And so I think it's easy for us to look at these changes and get really worried. And I get that, and I do worry about the parasocial relationships that are come, and they may exacerbate trends that we have in society where young people aren't going out and drinking and dating and all this sort of stuff that is a very serious problem already. It may exacerbate some of those, but it's also going to come with massive benefits, and those risks and those harms aren't as linear and straightforward to understand as many people think.
It's also inevitable, but if I can, it's not the activity that I'm worried about, it's the interactivity. So if you're watching TV with a person, there's a person there. If you're playing computer games online against another person and you know their name, there's a person there.
That's very AIs are humans too, John. I want you to be really clear. So Gene, I'll just before I run off, I'll take your.
Oh, just one question. Would you hazard a guess? Would you like to hazard a guess as to how far away the Westworld style robots are away? Are we talking a decade, 2 decades, 3?
Look, I mean, so robotics has come really, really far, really, really quickly recently. You will have seen some of the humanoid robots that Tesla has released. To get to Westworld, I think there's a lot of technical jumps that will need, like skin and all that sort of stuff to get there. I'm not keen for us to get there, and I don't think anybody will want us to get there. I don't think there's a demand for that. I think there's going to be a demand. The big open question I have about humanoid robots is that are humanoid robots the correct shape for robots? And there are pros and cons to that argument. So if you're in the industrial, if you're in an industrial setting, having human-shaped robots is kind of silly, because why would you want a human-shaped robot to work on a factory line? You want specific robots for specific tasks. It's cheaper, it's more efficient. But on the other hand, we live in a human-shaped world. And if I wanted a robot to wash my dishes tomorrow, it would need to be shaped like a human, because my sink is shaped for humans. So in a funny way, we can introduce humanoid robots to do really minor tasks much sooner. Now, I'll leave with another point, which is one of my favorite points on this. So and I'll drop this bomb and then I'll hang up. This is what will happen. So the Tesla robots that were launched 6 months ago, whenever that was, they weren't actually fully autonomous. They were remote controlled by people. All right. So they were humanoid looking, but they were remote controlled. Now that strikes me as by itself an already massive revolution, because we've talked a lot in the past in the free market movement about low-skilled migration. Can low-skilled migrants do the work that Australians don't want to do, or Americans don't want to do? And the problem that people raise is, well, if we're going to bring them all in, then suddenly we'll have an open borders and immigration will be out of control. They'll change our culture and so forth. What if we had remotely operated humanoid robots, remotely operated from other countries, doing the work that Australians don't want to do? Now, that's wild, but literally possible now, based on the Tesla robots that are real and exist and so forth. So the only reason I tell that story is because I think it's really interesting, but also so much of this technology changes the way we think about traditional public policy debates, like immigration and low-skilled immigration. Well, what if we've got low-skilled people operating robots in the developed world to wash my dishes, to clean cars and so forth? Now, is that good for people in the other economies, in the poor world? Is that good for us? Interesting to debate. I'll leave you with that, but thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Brilliant.
No worries. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right. Well, that was pretty interesting. He clearly knows, has been spent a lot more time diving deep into the issue of AI than I have.
Yes, I found it fascinating, his perspective, just how bullish, I suppose, and how positive he is about. I mean, I think AI is amazing, but I wouldn't have gone as far as to say that it's effectively infinite intelligence. I think that's extraordinary. But I mean, he's had a closer look at it than I have. I mean, but yeah, certainly we are at the beginning of it, and yeah, there could be some big changes coming up.
It is. It's a good hook to start this conversation, to say that we are currently at that point in history that's right at the beginning of every sci-fi story. Yes, right at the start of the sort of the Star Trek and all the rest of those stories. We're there now, and now we just got to wonder, I guess, which sci-fi movie are we in? Because the different series all end very differently. So I guess
absolutely
we will wait and see. Look, I guess I think it's inevitable, and things that are inevitable, it's kind of pointless raging too much against. And I think it is going to be a productivity boom. So I sort of agree with him 2/3 of the way. And then he said himself that it's Tim Humphreys said it better not be the Terminator movies. Yeah. Well, hopefully no time travel. And he said himself it's probably going to have some sort of social impacts. I guess I agree with him 2/3 of the way. And on that last one, I agree. There's going to be some social impacts, and we don't know them yet. And we don't want to get too Cassandra. So I guess it's quite a minor quibble. But I guess it seems that I am worrying more about those social impacts than Chris is. That's probably where we differ at the moment. Not that I'd do anything about it. Not that I think we can do anything about it. Like I don't know if this idea that Europe is slowing down their adoption. It seems to me all they're going to do is a year or two later, they're going to desperately go, oh shit, we're behind, and they're going to quickly try and catch up. So I can't imagine that it's going to be possible. I guess North Korea has managed to stop most people accessing the internet, but eventually North Korea is going to get on the internet too. So it's I don't think it's possible to stop. I don't know if there's something we can do to mitigate this. I guess it matters first whether we think it's actually a problem, the lack of social human connection.
Well, presumably we will need to have some type of guardrails or laws of robotics. I mean, Isaac Asimov had the 3 laws of robotics, didn't he? I mean, because there are some people, and even people who are knowledgeable in AI, concerned about, well, what if you could have an AI, if it gets these powers to actually operate things in the real world, you could have a rogue AI, couldn't you? I mean, maybe not Terminator, but you could have one that starts doing, there could be all sorts of unintended consequences. The whole thought experiment about, the thought experiment, what about if the goal is to maximize production of paper clips, and then it starts, eliminating humans who are getting in the road of maximizing paper clips, or just tears down bridges to make paper clips.
Will Smith started a movie called I, Robot, in which the AI at the center of that society worked out that the best way to maximize human longevity and to minimize human harm was to basically impose like a fascist robot AI government that controlled where humans could do, what humans could do, and kept them perfectly bubble wrapped. And I said, look, I've worked it out. This is the best way to achieve the goal. And Will Smith then blows up the AI and the world goes back to normal. Yes, it's I've ruined the ending for you. No, it's I should have spoiler warning.
Yeah, very good. That's all right. But I should watch it.
What happened if AI was made president? I quite enjoy Will Smith movies, but again, I have simple tastes and a low IQ. We didn't get around to chatting tax, but we often chat tax, and we'll be back soon, and we can talk about their tax ideas perhaps when we've got a better idea on what. It looks like they're coming up with no tax ideas anyway. I think they've said they're not going to do anything for the next 2 years. But we'll get back to that. We've taken up an hour 10, and we had a good hour there chatting with Chris. I think that was interesting. I learned something. I hope you did too. And you, viewing public, thank you for tuning in. If you have now, please give this a like, give it a share, give it a comment, send it around the algorithm. We do this most Thursdays. I can't quite say all Thursdays. I was camping last Thursday. Apologies. But we do this most Thursdays at, I believe the idea is to switch to 8 p.m. We had an earlier one this week because that was when Chris was available. But normally 8 p.m. Thursdays, you can find us here on YouTube, Facebook, and X. On YouTube and Facebook, you can find it on the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. Please go there if you haven't already. Give it a follow. And on X, you can find it on my personal account, x.com/JohnHumphreys99. And no, I'm not 99 years old, and I wasn't born in the year 99. It was just a round number to add to my name. So that's where you can find us. Please go there, give us a like, give us a follow. That's a very good point. The footy final schedule, that's mostly not on Thursday evenings, I believe. But I don't follow your weird southern football, Ryan. I'm a rugby league man, so I believe Ryan follows that other game, the one the Victorians play. But I'll keep an eye out for it. But so you can find us there. We also post these to Substack. We've got a Substack going for Oz Taxpayers, so substack.com. oztaxpayers.substack.com. You can find us there. So please go there, give us a follow, give us a like. We'll be back next week. You got any last words for us, Gene?
I really enjoyed that conversation with Chris. He's fabulous. He's a deep thinker. And I'm thinking that what he was talking about with having people in other countries controlling the robots in Australia sounds like a good business opportunity. We're going to have to look into that one. I think it's brilliant.
I suspect he was saying it mostly as a troll might be the wrong word, just as to get people thinking. Realistically, once you had robots doing the work for you, I imagine you could just program them pretty well using an AI to do most of that stuff. So you don't actually need the foreigner using a remote control.
Well, I mean, maybe you need it in an oversight role for when the robot sort of goes a bit awry, or it can't figure out something. Maybe. So I think there are some issues with robots doing fine motor movements, aren't there? I mean, I think that's one of the challenges with robotics. It's they're good in standard situations, but if something is a bit sort of awkward, or it becomes harder, like folding a towel or something, that type of thing is not as easy as doing some welding on a car. I think there's some issue with that. So maybe you need some human intervention every now and then, or oversight. It sounds plausible to me what he's talking about. And if the economics works out, if there's a $50 note lying on the street, John, someone's going to pick it up.
Well, it sounds like the new business gets launched tomorrow, Tunny Technologies. It's I'll be an early investor. We actually have a robot that goes around the house, already does the vacuum cleaner. I think a lot of people have them now, those robot vacuum cleaners.
Yes.
We call ours James, but James has a habit of getting lost still. But
yes.
I don't think we'll pay a foreigner to drive James for us. We'll just pick him up and move him. But anyway, maybe. Anyway, thank you, Gene, and thank you everyone at home for joining us. We'll be back next Thursday, most Thursdays, 8 p.m. Until then, this has been Gene Tunny. I am John Humphreys. This is from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, and we'll see you next week.